record button. For those that can't make it today or would like to share this with a friend or someone else afterwards, we will record it and put it on our educational YouTube channel. So my name is Monica McCoubry, and I am the Wildlife Education Specialist with the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission here in the Lincoln office. So I will also let my co-host introduce herself here as well.
Thank you, Monica. My name is Amber Schultz. I'm the Wildlife Education Program Manager of the Fish and Wildlife Education Division here at Nebraska Game and Parks. And so today during this awesome webinar, if you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in the chat. I will do my best to help answer them. And if I cannot, we will definitely have times where Monica will stop and answer your great questions. So we welcome your questions, and we should have a fantastic webinar today. So thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amber. All right. So like she said, we will have time for questions at the end, and there'll be some little kind of transition points to stop and talk and to discuss things as well. So today we're going to be talking about nature differences. So things that sometimes are confused with one another. And so kind of how to tell differences apart, or are there differences between them? So we have kind of a spread of different types of animals that we're going to be talking about today. So I'll go ahead and share my screen with everybody, and we will get started. All right. All right, here we go. All right, so we're going to be talking about some nature differences today. This picture really has no meaning. I just really like smooth green snakes, which are found in Nebraska. A lot of people, we don't see them very often. They're fairly small, but they are really cool, bright green, which is my favorite color. So it doesn't really have anything to do with nature differences today, but it was a cool photo. I just wanted to put that in there. Just like in the past, if you have attended a Science Of webinar before, or if you haven't, that's totally fine. Just letting everybody know that if you do have comments, please feel free to put them in the chat, but make sure they're topically related to what we're talking about today. Just be nice to everybody, be kind, and then otherwise we do have the right to remove you, which I'm sure we will not have a problem today, but just let everybody know. Also, just want to let everybody know that I am no expert in any of these subjects. I do a lot of research, and I really love science. So please don't think that I'm the expert. If I cannot answer your question, we will certainly find someone that can and get back to you as well. All right, so we're going to go ahead and just jump right in today with some nature differences on how to tell a couple of animals apart from each other, ones that are often confused or very hard to tell a difference between them. We're going to go ahead and start with mammals today. So first one that I want to talk about is our rabbits and our hares, or sometimes people will call them jackrabbits as well. So this is what we're going to talk about today. So I have to start, it's going to be a little different today. We're going to kind of compare and then talk about stuff, and we'll compare and contrast later. So rabbits and hares. So the photo, excuse me, on the left-hand side is going to be our eastern cottontail rabbit. And then this is going to be our snowshoe hare, which we do not have in Nebraska. It was very hard to find a good photo of a black-tailed jackrabbit, but same type of difference that we're going to talk about. All right, so rabbits in themselves, a lot of people kind of link rabbits together with rodents, things like beavers and mice. They're not. So they're not rodents. They are in their own separate order called Lagomorpha. So that just makes them a little bit different. They don't have those ever-growing teeth. They have different body structures and different habitats that they live in. Rabbits themselves, they tend to prefer a little bit more of a semi-wooded area with lots of cover, because that's how they camouflage and that's how they protect themselves. So we all know as rabbits having these long ears and these long limbs, which they use to run and to hear, but not as long as hares. And I'll show you here in a second. But hares have the extremely long legs and the extremely long, thank you very much, and the extremely long ears and the extremely long feet. So it's going to be a little difference between the two. They both have long ears, but they're going to be just a little longer and more extra or extraordinary in those hares. So baby rabbits are known as kittens or bunnies, sometimes people call them. When they're born, they are blind and naked at birth. They are fully then dependent on the mother, which is something that's a little bit different in the hares that we'll talk about here. Both of them, rabbits and hares, are going to be herbivores, so they eat plant material, but it's just kind of the different types of plant material that they eat. So rabbits will tend to feed on the tender leaves and the shoots on the plants, the very young plants. Hares are going to be a little bit different. They feed on kind of the more woody material, a little more crunchy, I guess, material or abrasive material. And then rabbits are also a little bit more sociable than hares. When you see them, you often see kind of colonies or rabbits together. Hares are kind of a little bit more lone wolf or lone hare, I guess. And then rabbits also have a very, very short gestational period. It's only about 30 to 31 days. And then these guys will completely have their burrows, most of them. The cottontail is actually one that doesn't, but they do have their burrows underground. And this is for some species of rabbits, but again, not all of them. And then rabbits, this is a very bad comparison, but rabbits actually tend to make better pets than hares do. So rabbits have been domesticated over time, hares have not. All right, so hares, or sometimes people call them jackrabbits. We do have jackrabbits in Nebraska. They're kind of found out in the western part of the state. We call them our black-tailed jackrabbits. Again, both rabbits and hares are not rodents. They are in a separate order called Lagomorpha. When you look at their teeth, they have these specialized little, when you look at their skull and their teeth inside, they have a tiny little tooth that kind of sticks up. That's a characteristic of our lagomorphs or our Lagomorpha order. Hares tend to prefer wide open spaces. We talked about rabbits, they like more cover. Hares have longer ears, they have longer hind legs. Hares are much faster. They spring away from predators, while rabbits tend to kind of just go hide in the nearest location that they can find. Hares will tend to feed on woodier material. They're less sociable than rabbits, like we talked about. They're kind of often by themselves. Newborns, instead of being called bunnies, what they will call them, or kittens, they will call them leverets. When they are born, they are fully developed at birth with their eyes open, which is very different than the rabbits. These guys also live completely above ground, so they do not burrow, as in some species of rabbits. And then a female hare is called a Jill, and a male is called a Jack. Rabbits are bucks and does. And then we don't have them in Nebraska, but the European hare, just how fast these guys can go. When they move, they can do 37 kind of full body lengths per second. Cheetahs, they can run at about 23 body lengths per second. So people always think of cheetahs as these super fast animals, which they are, but hares are very, very underrated in that category as well. All right. Another two mammals that we do both have in Nebraska, river otters and mink. Just looking at these photos, some people might be like, well, how do you not tell the difference? There's a very big difference between them. But when you see them quickly and you see them maybe off in a distance, it's very hard sometimes to distinguish between the two of them. So left-hand side here is going to be your river otter, and then this right-hand picture is an American mink. All right, so they are both in the same family, which is mostly going to be the case for a lot of these animals. They look very similar, so they're going to have certain characteristics that make them special. So both of them are going to be in this Mustelidae family. This includes things like your weasels, badgers, otters, ferrets, minks. They're all the same kind of cylindrical looking animals with the long tails. Otters are going to be fairly large compared to minks. Minks are only about the size of a little bit smaller than a house cat. Otters are much bigger, they're bulkier. Their fur is also a little bit more shiny when you look at it, although when they do get wet, it becomes darker, as most of our hair does. Otters, they also have a flat head when you look at them. Minks are a little bit more rounded, and they have these very big, round noses, small, tiny little ears, and very stiff whiskers. Just like a mink, though, they do have this very long cylindrical body, but their tail will thicken towards the base of it. These guys have webbed feet with 5 toes on each of their feet, and they have very large tracks, and they have pads on their feet to help them swim. So minks do not. Otters also, they're more specialized in their eating. They eat things like fish, but also birds, crustaceans, frogs. When you see them swimming, if you see an animal that kind of looks the same, if you just get a glance of it, is it a river otter? Is it a beaver? Is it a muskrat? Is it a mink? Sometimes it's kind of hard to tell. One thing about river otters is that when you're swimming or you see them swimming, you just see their head and part of their tail sticking up. They're also very shy and secretive. They usually are nocturnal, but not always. A lot of people see them during the daytime as well. All right, so in contrasting, we have our mink animal here. Again, they're both in that Mustelidae family. These guys are just going to be a little smaller. They're a little slimmer. They have these very dark, rich, glossy coats, and on their chins, they usually have a white spot. That's kind of like a signature of minks. The head is a little bit more like a ferret. The river otters are a little bit broader. They're a little bit chunkier looking. Minks have really fuzzy, short tails. Otters have longer, thicker tails. These guys do not have the webbed feet. They spend a lot of time by the river and by the water and the banks, but they don't, they're not really that semi-aquatic animal per se that a river otter is. They spend a little bit more time on land. They also have a little bit more variable of a diet. They eat birds, poultry, mammals, fish. Minks are pretty aggressive. They will kill an animal just for fun. It's not necessarily I'm going to kill because I'm hungry. They'll just do it because it's fun and they can. They're also not as secretive. They will see people and just, well, I don't really care. I'm going to keep doing my thing. River otters, if they see a person, usually they're gone, or usually they never even get to see a person. They're gone before that person approaches. These guys also have between 5 and 6 kits, and they stay with a mother for the very, very short time. River otters stay with their mom a little bit longer. All right, so we got river otters and minks. This is one that was a lot of people, I hear a lot about this a lot. They ask if we have lynx in Nebraska. We do not. We have bobcats. So if you can see the photos here, the left is going to be the lynx, the right is your bobcat. All right, so there's a lot of different types of lynx. The one that I picked, the Canadian lynx, they sometimes do have areas in the United States where both the lynx and the bobcat can be found. We don't have that in Nebraska, but places very, very western side of Colorado, Utah, up by northern places like Montana, you can certainly see both of them. But overall, there's a huge size difference. Lynx are very large, bobcats are not. There are some lynx species that can get up to 90 pounds. Bobcats can maybe get up to 30, 40 pounds in some areas. Lynx are also a little bit more built for a colder climate. They have very thick, dense fur. It's usually a brownish, kind of a grayish color, and they have the insides of their legs. You're going to see kind of a white chest and a belly. They have very thick, furry paws, which they use because, again, they're in those kind of colder environments. And another main difference is if you look at this photo here, you will notice that they have those black tufts on their ears. This is a very characteristic thing of a lynx. Lynx usually get them about an inch long sometimes. So if you see those, most likely you're looking at a lynx. These guys are kind of lazy. They're kind of sedentary animals. They aren't especially fast, while as bobcats are. And then some species of lynx actually have a shortened muzzle, which inhibits their sense of smell. So they have to rely on their hearing and their eyesight to track prey. So they're kind of that sedentary predator, whereas a bobcat, we'll talk about here in a minute, is a pouncer. All right, so bobcats, we have them in Nebraska. They're both in the same family. The scientific name of a lynx is a Lynx canadensis for that Canadian lynx, and then bobcat, it's Lynx rufus. So they have very similar names to each other. They're very closely related, but there are very big differences. Again, the size is the main difference, and then again, those ear tufts. If you notice in this photo, they do not have ear tufts, so this is going to be a bobcat. Bobcats are a little bit smaller. They have shorter legs. They have smaller paws. They can live in a variety of habitats. They could be found in a desert. They could be found in a wooded area. They could be found in the snow. They generally avoid humans, but they can walk into some urban areas. It has been known. People have seen them before in their backyards or in garages or barns or things like that. They're usually pretty fearless in their behavior. They will kill their prey by pouncing on it. So they'll sit up on a perch and kind of survey their terrain to find an animal and then pounce on it. They also will cache their food. If you remember me talking about voles and shrews will do this, woodpeckers do this, squirrels do it. A lot of animals will keep their food and then go back and eat it later. And these guys can even survive really long periods without food, which depending on where they're living in their habitats, like the arid environment or the cold environment, this works really well for them. All right, so those were our mammals that we talked about today. We have a lot of invertebrates to get through, so kind of bear with me here. One that a lot of people get confused is dragonflies and damselflies. So looking at the two of them side by side here, it's easy to see why they are comparable with each other, but there are very, very big differences that once you know them, you're like, oh, that's a dragonfly, or oh, that's a damselfly. So left-hand side, you're going to have the dragonfly. Right-hand side is a damselfly. All right, so dragonflies and damselflies are in the same order. The Odonata order is what they're going to be in. Dragonflies are predatory animals, so they have very large eyes. They are able to grab mosquitoes and other insects right out of the air, so they have to have these huge eyes that take up most of their head. They wrap around the side of their face and even towards the front. Damselflies are a little bit different. We'll talk about that. Dragonflies have bulkier bodies, a little shorter, kind of thicker. Damselflies look like long sticks or twigs. Both of them have two sets of wings, but it just kind of depends on the shape of their wings. Dragonflies have hind wings that are very, very broad at the base, and then which makes them look kind of larger. And then the easiest way to tell is when they are at rest, like this photo here. Dragonflies hold their wings kind of perpendicular or out to the side, kind of like an airplane, and damselflies kind of hold them up. All right, so like I said, damselflies, they're in the same order, that Odonata order. Dragonflies have those huge eyes that kind of stretch all the way across their face. Damselflies do have large eyes, but there is always a gap between their eyes. If you ever get a chance to see them sitting still and you notice a gap, you know right away that's going to be a damselfly. You're also going to know because they're thinner, they're not as stocky as a dragonfly. They have two sets of wings again, but the damselflies are actually going to have wings that are the same size for both sets. So there's not one that looks bigger than the other like in the dragonfly. And then damselflies, when they are at rest, they will hold their wings up and together across the top of their backs. And again, dragonflies hold them perpendicular, kind of like an airplane. All right, moths and butterflies. These are two that a lot of people think they know the difference based on the color, but I always tell people that color is not a good way to identify animals because there's always an exception. There's always going to be an albino animal or a melanistic animal, or this animal just is not very colorful and this one is. So color is never a great way to tell the difference. Sometimes that is the way to tell, but not for moths and butterflies. So I tried to pick a picture here. A lot of people think moths are brown and boring and not very colorful. This Luna moth is one that we have in Nebraska. Very bright, very colorful. But again, looking at that compared to a swallowtail, it's way more vibrant as far as their colors go. So there is a little bit difference, but not much. They're very similar to each other. They're in the same order. They are insects. They're in the Lepidoptera category. The most obvious difference is going to be their way their wings rest. Moths normally rest with their wings open. There's always an exception. This is not 100% true of every single moth out there, but normally they will rest with their wings open. Moths are usually nocturnal, not all of them though. The antennas are usually kind of feathery, or they look like leaves. As you can see right here, they're kind of yellowish on this Luna moth. They also, moths, one big characteristic between the two of them is they have something called a frenulum, which is a wing coupling device basically that's on their wings that ensures that when they fly, their wings will travel together. Butterflies do not even possess one of these. Moths will usually make cocoons that are made out of silk. Butterflies make chrysalises, but again, there's the gypsy moth, which actually makes a chrysalis. So there's always exceptions. Moths are a little bit more stockier. They tend to be a little bit more furry. They almost look dusty when you see them. So again, they often duller, but again, not always. They're less vibrant in color. And then their eyes are also a big difference. So they have the superposition eyes, which basically reflects because they're normally nocturnal. They need to let in as much light as possible to see. Butterflies are going to have a little bit different eyes. So butterflies, when they rest, they usually rest with their wings open. butterflies tend to rest with their wings closed. However, like this photo that I have here, they usually open them up to what we call sun bake, to get warm and get their blood flowing. And then when they fly off and they rest again, they will oftentimes close them. So when people see this, they might think, oh, that's a moth because it's resting with its wings open. So again, there's always exceptions. The antennae usually tend to be really long and thin, and they're kind of clubbed on the end. It's really hard to tell in this photo as far away, but if you look really close at the ends of their antenna, they get a little bit thicker than they do towards the back, or like a moth that are furry. They have no frenulum, the moths do. The butterflies normally will make chrysalises. They are a little bit more smooth and lean. They have smaller scales on them. So butterflies and moths both do have scales. If you ever touch one of them and you look at your hands, you will notice you usually have some little vibrant colors or scales on your fingers. Those are from those animals. And then they also have these things called apposition eyes. So basically they take a bunch of images and they like switch them back around and combine them together to go to the brain to make that one image. Moths do not have that. And then other times, like I said, moths are usually a little bit more duller. Butterflies are a little bit more vibrant in color. All right, I'm going to stop for a second. I noticed I forgot to stop when we were at the kind of transition zone here. I totally forgot about that. And then I saw the chat pop up. So I didn't know if we had questions.
Monica, there was one thought about chrysalis versus a cocoon. There's some really good questions by Catherine. She wondered about, is it a chrysalis inside that cocoon? I'm not sure what.
Yeah, when I did the science of moths and butterflies, someone mentioned that technically a cocoon is a chrysalis that is inside of it. Yes, I don't know the exact term that Neil Dankert used, but yes, it was kind of something like that. Yeah, sun-baked. Yes, basking is a better term. That's what we use for reptiles as well. Technically, I mean, it's the same thing, but yes, that is a better term.
My understanding too is a cocoon versus a chrysalis is what it's the material that it's made of. So that cocoon is more of it's made from a silk versus a chrysalis. It's actually considered like part of they molt into a chrysalis, which is like part of their hard exoskeleton.
Yeah, it's made of that chitin material. You're right.
Right. So that's really interesting to bring that up. Thank you so much, Catherine.
Yes. All right, so this one kind of hits close to home lately. My husband was stung by a wasp lately, so got some good stories to tell about this. But when you talk about wasp versus bee versus hornet, and then you hear some people say yellow jacket, and then you hear some people say, I got stung by this, and what is this? And so there's a lot of different kind of terms going around as far as waspy. Is it a hornet? Is it a yellow jacket? What is the thing? So the very, very left-hand side here, this was the best photo that I could get where you could see that was free for the body to show. This is not one that we have in Nebraska, is actually in Australia, but you can kind of see towards the middle here, they have a very thin waist on this wasp. Bees, most people know usually what bees look like. They're a little bit more furry. And then hornets are a little larger. Technically, they're a little bit larger. And we'll talk about those as well. But I mean, just when you see something flying around and you're trying to, maybe you're at a picnic and you're trying to swat it away from your watermelon or your hot dogs or whatever, it just kind of all blurs and blends to look the same sometimes. So when we talk about these animals, wasps, there's a lot of different types of wasps. So when we talk about it, a hornet is technically a wasp. A wasp is a wasp. A yellow jacket is a wasp. So it's just like depending on what kind of species they are and where they are and the material that they use to make nests and their paper. And it just, there's a lot of different things that kind of come together. So wasps, when you talk about it and you break it down, they could either be social wasps or they're solitary wasps, depending on the species that they are. Paper wasps and yellow jackets are going to be the most common ones that you're going to encounter in the United States. When you look at a wasp, they have a very pinched waist. is like the most time that I could ever say that that's a waist on an animal, that the waist is going to be very narrow and kind of pinched. They also are normally black, and they have different shades of yellow and or orange on their body. This one from Australia looks way more red orange than the ones that we see sometimes in Nebraska even. They don't have a lot of hair like bees do, so that's kind of a dead giveaway that it's probably not a bee. Their size, I mean, they could range from 1/2 inch to 1 inch long. Yellow jackets are maybe a little bit shorter. Wasps will build nests in places like eaves and gutters and bushes, pretty much anywhere that is a good location. But yellow jackets are going to build their nests in the ground. So there's a little big difference between them. Wasps are highly predatory animals, and they can sting more than once and will repeatedly sting more than once. All right, so here's a good comparison. I mean, clearly you look at the colors and you know that they're different, but again, color's not always a good way to tell animals from each other. So left-hand side, there's a yellow jacket, right-hand side is a paper wasp. All right, so bees. Bees are a little bit more furry when you look at them, or fuzzy. A lot of us have seen a bee and we know what it looks like. But again, if it's flying around you and all of a sudden you get stung, you don't know what's going on. It could be a bee, it could be a wasp, it could be a hornet, you don't know. Most of the time, the most common bees that you're going to find in the US, they're going to be honeybees, carpenter bees, and bumblebees. Of some kind of species of those bees you're going to see very commonly. Bees are usually kind of robust. They're a little bit more stocky and not as thin as some of those other animals like yellow jackets or wasps. Bees are often fuzzy because they need those fuzzy hairs to collect that pollen. They range in size, again, from 1 inch up to 1/2 inch up to 1 inch long, sometimes 1/4 inch. Most bees will sting. There are some that don't really have an interest in stinging, but a lot of them can. Honeybees are one of those that a lot of people know. They see them quite often. They sting once and they're done, but some bees can sting repeatedly. So it just depends on that species. Like I said, some bees are not aggressive at all. They just kind of do their thing, and unless they're absolutely provoked, they will not sting you. So they can also be found in a wide range of habitats. There's ground, wood, they're going to be by bushes, they're going to be in the woods, they're going to be in moist areas. I mean, it just, again, depends on the species. All right, so hornets have gotten really bad names in the past couple of years, especially when COVID was hitting. I think we all had like our COVID bingo cards about what's going to happen this month. And one month it was murder hornets, which are not from the United States. And they were way out, I think, on the Oregon coast. So hornets are actually they are wasps. They are in the genus Vespa, which are very closely related to yellow jackets. So the European hornet, or sometimes people call them the brown hornet, the giant hornet, they are the main type that you're going to find in the US. They are not native to the United States. They were brought over here to North America in about 1840. They differ from wasps in the fact that they are both active day and night. They are not the same thing for other species of wasps, which are usually during the day. They're very large animals, usually often reddish brown, and they have stripes on their abdomen. And then the European hornets will make their nests in trees or barns. They will readily sting, and again, they can sting repeatedly. So something that's a little bit different from that of like a honeybee. These guys also are attracted to light. Again, they are found diurnal, nocturnal. So again, they're attracted to light. They eat some tree sap, but overall, they're very good predators. They eat things like flies and even other bees. All right, so I think again, I'll go to this picture here where you can all see now there's difference between bee, hornet, wasp. It just, again, it's hard to tell in just a moment when they're flying around you sometimes. All right, so this one I hear a lot too. I've heard daddy-longlegs, I've heard harvestmen, I've heard long-legged harvestmen. There's a lot of different terms for these things, but I think most of us probably know, if you don't, that's totally fine, that the one on the left is going to be your harvestman. It's not a true spider. And then this is actually a wolf spider. So they're very different looking at the two of them. And I'll show you ones that look very similar to each other here in a second. But the most common term that I hear people call them, at least here in Nebraska, are daddy-long-legs. But the more sciencey term, if you want to go that route, is called a harvestman. So the one that I have here is actually called a long-legged harvestman. They are arachnids, so they are in the same kind of category as spiders, but they are not spiders. They're kind of the same that butterflies are insects, but they're not beetles, but beetles are insects. So it's kind of a runaround, but overall they are arachnids, but they are not true spiders. They're more related to scorpions. They only have one body part. Spiders have two. They only have usually a couple of eyes on this tiny little bump. Spiders usually have more. They have a segmented abdomen. Spiders do not. They do not have silk. They do not contain venom. They have totally different mouth parts than true spiders. So true spiders only usually eat liquids. These guys have chewing mouth parts. They also have an entirely different respiratory system. Not all of them also will have long legs, but kind of daddy long legs has been the term that describes all of them. And then a lot of people confuse them with the long-legged house spider, which is actually a spider. Sometimes people call them a cellar spider, but they look very similar to each other. So not a spider, but they are arachnids. So true spiders, spiders are true arachnids, are in the same family as scorpions, mites, and ticks. Daddy long legs, like we talked about, they have one body section. Spiders will have two. They have a cephalothorax and an abdomen. They have more than one or two eyes. They usually have 8, but not every single spider has that. They lack the chewing mouth parts like those daddy long legs do. So they will have fangs oftentimes, which they will use to kind of slurp up their meal. But again, these guys have venom. They can have venom. They produce silk, but again, not all spiders will. They're not social. Harvestmen have been found to be very social. They're found in colonies. Spiders are a little bit more by themselves. And to make things even more confusing, there is an actual spider called the daddy long legs, which is also called the cellar spider, which we have here in Nebraska. So here's a great picture to kind of show between them. Again, this left-hand side here is going to be your harvestman. And then this is going to be your spider, your true, what we call cellar spider. We have them here in Nebraska. Sometimes they're called the long-legged cellar spider. You can see just them crawling around, how they would be very confusing with each other, but there is still very big differences. All right, I did see that there were some things in the chat. Yep, male bees don't ever sting. They don't have a stinger. Solitary bees will not sting. Yep, that's what I found when I was doing this as well. Honeybees are social bees. Yep. How do harvestmen hunt if they have no venom? I did not really look to see that far ahead when I was looking at this. I assume since they have chewing mouth parts, they will just grab their food. I'm not sure. It obviously would have to be very small for them to eat. Someone asked, is the venom poisonous to humans? Yeah, good question. So I had a lot of people ask me that before, or there's been some myths out there that they are very venomous, you know, but harvestmen, when they're talking about that, they're very venomous, but when they bite you, their teeth are so small that it doesn't affect humans. They do not have any, harvestmen themselves do not produce venom, and they don't have any venom. So it is not dangerous for people. How do you tell the difference between house spiders and harvestmen? Yep, we kind of just talked about that. So house spiders, for instance, have 2 different body parts. Harvestmen have 1. Spiders are going to have a little bit more, well, they're going to have more eyes, and harvestmen do not. So there's a good kind of big differences here as well. All right, we will just keep going. All right, this is our last category. A little bit shorter today. We're going to talk about reptiles and amphibians. So one huge difference here is our turtles and our tortoises. So in Nebraska, we do not have tortoises unless they are for some reason released as a pet. We do not have them as a wild animal, but we do have turtles in Nebraska. All right, I really love this meme. It's just been one that I really find funny. It says recently my 6-year-old said to me, "Dad, those turtles are playing piggyback," and I knew it was time to have the talk. "Son," I said, "those are tortoises, not turtles." If you're not talking herpetology about to your kids, then who is? So knowing the difference between turtles and tortoises is a big thing. When we're at the zoo, my daughter and I, we always, we hear people say, "Oh my gosh, look at the turtles. They're clearly tortoises," and I'm trying to teach her the difference. So. All right, so when we talk about turtles, turtles and tortoises are both reptiles. They're both in the order Testudinidae. However, there are huge differences between them. Most difference is that true turtles spend more time in the water, and then tortoises are going to spend more time on land. Turtles are usually found in Africa and the Americas. Tortoises have a little bit different kind of niche. They usually have flat, streamlined shells. Most of the aquatic turtles will have webbed feet. This guy is just a common snapping turtle that you would find here in Nebraska. Most turtles are going to be omnivores. It just kind of depends on the stage that they're into. For instance, snapping turtles, when they're little, they're a little bit more carnivorous. When they get older, they can become omnivorous, a little bit more plant material in their diet. Turtles, they nest and then they'll kind of stay in their nest by themselves for about 90 to 120 days, depending on the species. And again, this is not for every turtle, but just kind of a common characteristic of the average turtle. And then turtles and tortoises are both long-lived. However, turtles are way shorter living than tortoises are. All right, so when we talk about a tortoise, again, they're in the same category. They are reptiles. They're in the order Testudinidae. A major difference is that they are going to mostly dwell on land. They are not going to be aquatic like a painted turtle or a snapping turtle. Most oftentimes they're found in Asia and Africa. We do have a species that exists in Florida called the gopher tortoise. You can find them kind of in the Fort Lauderdale area. Most of the times when you look at their shell, they're more dome shaped than they are flat like a painted turtle, for instance. Their shells are a little bit heavier. Their feet, when you look at them, they're more clubbed and they're kind of bent, especially in the large like Galapagos tortoises. You will notice that they have almost like elephant feet and toes. Hatchlings oftentimes will move soon after birth, so not like the turtles. These guys are also very long-lived, 80 to 150 years old, maybe even longer, we're not sure. And then one animal that we have in Nebraska that is kind of in this weird middle part is our ornate box turtle. So technically they are turtles, but they are more related to tortoises than they are things like a painted turtle or a snapping turtle. So they're kind of our weird terrestrial turtle that we have here in Nebraska, but they are not tortoises. All right, ones that people get a lot of time confused, or oftentimes I hear people say, "Oh, look at the lizard," but it's actually a salamander, or sometimes they call them geckos. So on the left-hand side, you will see a sagebrush lizard, which we have here in about 2 counties in Nebraska. And then we also have something called a barred tiger salamander, which are very, very different from each other. So true lizards, they are reptiles. Salamanders are amphibians. Lizards will have dry, scaly skin. They are mostly terrestrial, 5 toes on each foot. Their way that they move is very different. So lizards have very long legs and they tend to kind of creep along. I guess the best way to describe salamanders is they scuttle. Lizards, since they are reptiles, they have claws and they have external ear openings. Which you can kind of see in the photo here. It would be right here, this little frill section. And then they have leathery, partially calcified shells on their eggs. They're buried in the sand. And then lizards are normally larger, although there are things called hellbenders and giant Chinese salamanders, which sometimes get to 6 feet long. So there are always exceptions. All right, salamanders, they are not reptiles. They are in fact related to frogs and toads, and caecilians and newts. They're going to be amphibians. They live mostly in the water, but although they metamorphosis and then they come on land, they have smooth, moist skin. It's very close fitting. If you look at this, it's almost tight on their body. If you look at a lizard, you see some loose areas as well. So these guys, they do not breathe with lungs their entire life. So what they do is they have gills at some point. Others sometimes will breathe through their skin or their mouth, or things like the axolotls. They never metamorphosis, so they always they don't have lungs. So they breathe very differently from each other. These guys require standing water to breed and to lay eggs. They have shorter legs. They move differently. They scuttle and not really creep. They do not have external ear openings, and they do not have claws. So if you touch these feet right here, they're going to feel very sticky and they're very smooth and wet. Salamanders will lay eggs, but they are not hard shelled or calcified. They're going to be almost more like gelatinous eggs. And then over time, they will metamorphosis and return to land and then return to water again to lay their eggs. All right, I think this is our last one. We got frogs and toads. So again, looking at these guys side to side, you can definitely see the differences. The left-hand side is our leopard frog that we have here in Nebraska, one of them. And then on the right-hand side is going to be our Woodhouse's toad. So very differences when you look at them right away. Frogs are amphibians, so are toads. These guys will have usually sleek, smooth skin. More often than not, you are going to see them close to water. They are not going to be far away from a water source because they absolutely need it. I like this term that frogs are like athletic looking. They're a little bit more lean and thin and slim. Toads are going to be a little bit more stocky and kind of chunky. The frog eggs, when they are laid in masses or clumps. Toads are actually going to lay their eggs in chains. So if you ever see that in the water, you know these are toads, these are frogs. Toads, they're also going to have, they don't have teeth. So technically frogs will have teeth. They're not like the teeth that you and I have, the enamel. But if you ever have touched a fish, for instance, and reach your hand in a fish to get the hook out, you kind of notice a little serrated skin that's up there. Those are the same types of teeth that frogs will have. And normally when you look at them, their eyes are very buggy. They stick out really far. They bulge out. All right, toads are a little bit different. They are both amphibians. Toads, however, are a little bit more terrestrial. So they are going to be found farther away from water. They are dry and bumpy in their skin. This is because they have those kind of warty areas that hold in water or moisture. So they've adapted a little bit more to drier conditions than things like frogs have. If you look at their eyes, they're a little bit more set inside their face than toads or than frogs are. And then these guys, it's really hard to see in this photo, but about right here, they're going to have these things called parotoid glands, which is basically a toxin. That's how they protect themselves. So these guys, what they will do is they, if a dog or something bites into these like Woodhouse's toad, it's going to release this kind of milky fluid that will make the dog sometimes foam at the mouth. It's just going to taste really bad, so that predators do not want to eat them. If there are some frogs, however, like our poison dart frogs, that if you touch them, they do have a special secretion on their skin that is poisonous. So similar, but just a little bit different. These guys also have shorter, stockier legs. So if you ever seen a toad, they more crawl than they do hop or jump. And then again, they're a little bit more squattier, and they have a shortened kind of a flat nose. And then frogs in this photo, they have a little bit more elongated nose. So a little bit of differences there. Hopefully that helped you with some of our animals that we have here in Nebraska. So if you see them kind of at a quick glance, you might be able to identify them a little bit better. Next week is actually our last one for the summer, and then we'll start back up at the end of August. We're going to do the science of sturgeon next week. So in Nebraska, we have 3 different types of sturgeon. We have shovel-nose, pallid sturgeon, and then very often, not often seen, I guess, lake sturgeon. We're going to talk about them. And then, like I said, we have our last one next week. If you really like this and you want to see more, we have a Game and Parks Education YouTube channel. You can just kind of Google search that. And then we have some playlists that is under the science of, or we have conservation career chats. We have lots of different good resources on there. We have an education Facebook page. We have an education Instagram page. And then again, we have our main website, just wildlife education. So there's a lot of different things that you can see on there. There's lesson plans, there's resources, good things to find. All right, hopefully everyone will join me next week for sturgeon. And then as always, do we have any questions? I saw that there were some things in the chat.
Monica, we had one question about the difference between harvestmen and spiders. I happen to know this a little bit because recently my 4-year-old has become obsessed with Daddy-longlegs. So we watch lots of YouTube videos on it. But one of them is, I know that the spiders, they have the 2 different body parts, the cephalothorax and the abdomen, and then the harvestmen have the 1. Do you have any other differences between them? Do you know?
Yeah, we actually did cover all of those. Yeah, so I don't know if that person was just kind of maybe out when we said that, but yeah, if they wanted to go back and rewatch that, everything you said, I think we kind of talked about.
Okay, cool.
So, perfect.
And
Thank
then
you.
losing their tail, does a lizard or the salamander lose their tail and grow it back? So can you answer that?
Yeah, so it depends on the species, but yes, they technically can. Salamanders, especially lizards in general, if predators grab their tails, that's better than them grabbing their face or their head. So oftentimes they will grow back, both in salamanders and in lizards. It will never be the same as it was when they are born and if they never lose their tail. So it might grow a little bit shorter or be a little bit like stockier or almost stubbed, but they do grow back, yes.
Good. That's a really good question. And then Catherine asked, do toads have a round membrane where an ear would be the way frogs do?
Yeah, so if you look, they don't have like the external ears like we do, like our pinnae that we have here. So frogs, this guy is super pronounced. So this is their tympanum. This is the plains leopard frog. Leopard frogs and bullfrog. I think frogs in general just have really pronounced. This is where their ear would be. Toads don't necessarily have that as much. It's very smooth right here. So it's definitely more of a frog thing that I would say. Yeah, good question.
Mm-hmm. I think that's all I see. And people are excited about sturgeons, and so am I.
I am super excited about sturgeon. I cannot wait for next week. I'm very excited. Someone said a long-legged spider just showed up next to my computer. Wow, what a great thing. Look at that. How ironic. So hopefully you can tell if it's a harvestman now or a long-legged spider. So awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We'll hopefully see you next week, June 24th, same time, 3 to 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. There is a evaluation that we will send out to you, hoping to get your feedback about this and then helping you register for next week as well. So if you have any questions, we'll maybe stick around here another 30 seconds. Otherwise, we will see you next week. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Amber.